Hey everybody, it's time for our final rodeo together. Yippee! Anyway, I promised you all semester that I would give you my final presentation on how to solve all the world's problems, which sounds arrogant and ambitious, and it is, but I stand by what I say. Anyway, um, I have notes in this that I try to follow because I start going off on tangents and some of the stuff I talk about here. So just bear with me if I do. And I got to return back to my notes so I can present this to you in as orderly a way as possible that it might even make sense. Who knows? It's not raised the bar too high here, Maynard. Before I get started, it reminds me of a story of I had a student taking the course who had a friend who took it some years earlier. And I said, "Oh, well, really, how did your friend enjoy the course, SOC 100?" And she said, "I didn't understand a word Maynard said." And I thought it was probably in reference to this last presentation, I hoped. Okay, so first of all, a little rock and roll quiz question for you. Who wrote the lyrics, "Create a new reality that's closer to the heart"? Don't know? Okay, Canadian group, Canadian rock and roll group, classic rock group. No? Four letters. Starts with an R. Rush. Yeah, that's correct. Check out the song sometime. Um, it's a great song and it kind of summarizes a lot of what I've been trying to say throughout the whole semester, that what we need is to create a new reality that's closer to the heart. Anyway, people all the time say, "Maynard, why do you do what you do?" Well, it all goes back to another one of Maynard's amazing anecdotes. Want to hear it? Yeah, like you got a choice. Well, you can. You can just turn off this whole thing because it doesn't count toward your grade or anything. Anyway, back in the 60s, at one point, I was doing some magic mushrooms. And I was up in the local, the Blue Mountain, as we call it here. And because it would drive me kind of crazy to do psychedelic substances and stay inside. I like to go out and commune with nature. And boy, this was quite a revelatory experience because I could really feel the connection with everything out there and see the shimmering energy and all living things. It was awesome. Anyway, but I noticed as I was wandering about on the mountain that on the top of the mountain there was some smoke. So I figured I'd best investigate. And I get to the top of the mountain, and lo and behold, there was a giant marijuana bush, but it wasn't being consumed by the flame. Now, in case you're wondering where this is going, I refer you back to the story of Moses. But anyway, so I walked up to the plant as it was not being consumed by the flame, and all of a sudden I heard a voice, and it was like, "Maynard." And I went, "Whoa, it's God." And the voice said, "Put down that joint and listen what I have to say." I went, "Okay." And he said, "Your mission is to go forth into the future and spread the word and the spirit of the 60s. So, like the Blues Brothers, I'm on a mission from God." True story. Anyway, Peter Drucker said the best way to predict the future is to create it. Now, I said this during our first class session, and I'm going to say it again because here's where you're going to have to once again have an open mind. And just again, you don't have to agree with what I say. I just want you to understand the internal logic of what I have to say. I mentioned during our first class that Werner Erhard declared that true clarity can come only when someone is willing to notice, quote, "There is something I do not know, the knowing of which could change everything," period. So a lot of what I'm going to go into today includes theology, and it includes cosmology. Theology is the study of the creator. So this does not come from any particular religious focus. It actually incorporates what all the great sages and gurus throughout time and cultures have said, as I've mentioned throughout the whole semester. I'm just giving you feedback on what they have to say as to what they say is the true nature of reality. Okay, so my basic argument throughout this whole semester has been that, to quote again the great historian Arnold Toynbee, all civilizations are based on religion. And to put it in a more broad scope, I agree with that. And I think that that all civilizations are based in a way that's congruent with their understanding of the nature of reality, their connection to the creator and what the creator is all about, and their relationship with the creator. So having said that, this is the foundation of every civilization. Now, my argument is if those perceptions about the nature of reality or the nature of the creator or our relationship with the creator are incorrect, then the whole building blocks of civilization are based on faulty perceptions about the true nature of reality. So throughout this course, and I'm arguing that's exactly what's happened, that's why our social problems are so never ending. They're all intertwined. Why? Because it's all of our culture is based on false premises about the true nature of reality and our relationship with the creator. And so that's the fundamental problem. And so my argument throughout this semester has been, are you sure you know the real nature of reality? Because here's what the sages say. And I know in a lot of cases it was 180 degrees different than what most of us have been raised to believe. Now, this is not to say that the way you were raised was wrong or that I guess the best way I would put it is we received up until now from most of our organized religions in which we participate an incomplete understanding. And in some cases, misperceptions as people in the name of the organized religions kind of shifted things around a little bit from the original message to suit the purposes of the organized religion and its continuation. So that's why I try to present this to you from a very eclectic point of view. Okay, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, something I think I mentioned previously in the course is when you typically see it in academia, you see at the top of the pyramid self-actualization. That's not the top of Maslow's hierarchy. And I don't know if it's because people in academia aren't comfortable with talking about this topic, but the top of his pyramid is unitive consciousness. Now, bear in mind that his whole pyramid was based on actual interviews he had with people. So he has met with people who have achieved unitive consciousness. I would assume those are people who I've also read about who have achieved, as they call it, what we call enlightenment. And so that is our highest calling, that we are all capable of it, not just these exclusive individuals. We are all capable of achieving this unitive consciousness. Now think about the term unitive consciousness. What's referred to? The recognition that everything is one. There is no separation. Okay, I think it's also interesting that when you look at, there's at least 24, some say as many as 200 different scales of human development. And they all have certain things in common. And one of the things that they have in common as you go up the scale, whether it's relationships or whether it's morality, whatever it is, they all have the same feature. As you go up the scale, the next level features a wider embrace of everyone and a greater expression of love. Well, if you put these all together, it seems as though there's a direction, a telos to humanity, which is toward a greater embrace of one another and a greater understanding and compassion for one another. Well, let's start with the beginning of the hierarchy. Now, again, this is his hierarchy of human needs. And what Maslow argued is that you can't move on to the next level until you have largely the first level satisfied. then you can't move on to the third level until you have the first two levels largely satisfied. So what's the first level? It's physiological security. So we're talking food, clothing, shelter, adequate clean water, healthy environment, so forth and so on. So one of my criticisms of capitalism, in fact, my main criticism of capitalism is what is it? It's an economic system that's designed to meet everybody's needs, ideally, so that we each have enough food, clothing, and shelter. And I would argue, well, it's horribly flawed because, for example, in this country, you have the top 20% controlling 90% of the wealth, half the income, and the rest of the 80% are in all varying degrees of insecurity physiologically. Only the top 20% has any kind of certainty of physiological security well into the future. Well, what's the point of the economic system if it can't provide that for everyone? If you take the people at the bottom, and again, as I said before, if you go through the rest of the population, you're going to see more or less, most of us are one or two paychecks away from the dumpster. That's how close to the vest we're playing it, let alone are we going to have enough for any kind of a retirement. So to me, that's a singular failure of the economic system, that it doesn't meet everybody's basic economic needs. Now, I know the argument is, no, see, the economic system provides equal opportunity. But I would argue, and I think throughout this course, I've made my point that it in fact does not offer equal opportunity to everyone, that the way it's set up is it systemically screws over the majority of the population. Anyway, now, I haven't forgotten about the fact it does produce this vast array of goods, but we'll come to that in a moment. So point number one, we haven't even achieved physiological security. Now things are getting better. Only 600 million people are still starving to death, which is a lot better than 1 billion of just 10 years ago. Yeah, so we're making progress. But again, we're not there yet. So what's the next level? The next level is safety. Now, I would argue people are feeling even less safe now than they did 50, 60, 70 years ago. When I was a kid in a small town, you didn't lock your doors. There was no need to. Now, everybody in that town locks their doors because there's a need to. So the first level is physiological security. The second level is safety. It doesn't seem like we're doing too well on even those two basic levels. Let me put it another way. People who are starving to death will easily risk safety in order to achieve physiological security. So you can see why he ranked them as he did. Okay, a book I would like to point out to you just to make a point is actually a couple of books written by Eric Fromm. One was called The Sane Society. And in the book, what he basically says is that 90% of us are neurotic and the other 10% are psychotic. Now, personally, I pride myself in being in the psychotic wing because nobody knows what to expect then. But his point is we're all collectively nuts. And I've been trying to make that point throughout the semester as well. Now, we don't think of ourselves that way because you're looking at it, well, no more nutty than that one. But think about it collectively. One, we don't feed everybody. We allow people to live in poverty and don't even care. Two, we continue to discriminate against one another and judge each other by skin color and ethnicity and nationality and all kinds of crazy stuff that has nothing to do with our humanity as such, that our humanity supersedes all that. Those are all important aspects of ourselves, but we refuse to understand our common humanity and don't recognize the fact that there is more differences within groups than there are between groups. Instead, we put all our emphasis on the differences between groups. We pollute our own life base, our environment. We conduct wars with one another, so on and on and on. All of and we keep doing the same things over and over and over again, hoping for different results, which is the very definition of insanity. So I would argue collectively, we as a human civilization are insane, or at the very least, hardly very evolved. In his other book, To Have or To Be, he said, you got two choices. I'm oversimplifying this, but I'll go into more detail in a moment. He said, you can either have things or you can be. And that the more you have, the less you are. Now, this gets into the last issue that you read about, and wrote about and had a threaded discussion on, are we, should we continue to be a consumerist society? Well, let me start off with kind of a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on the history of advertising, because I think one of the things that's interesting to me is, that we just keep buying this stuff no matter what. Why? Well, first of all, if you go back to the early 1900s and look at advertisements, which would appear on perhaps the radio, later on in the 20th century, or in magazines, which I actually looked at from the early part of the 20th century, they'd have a picture of the product and a description of the product, which basically said, here's what it is, pretty nice product. What do you think? Here you are. Here we are. You want to buy it? This is it. Wasn't very slick, very descriptive ads. Okay, then came the whole theory of modern advertising. And one of the first theories was repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay, so notice this yourself. Today, look how often you will see the same ads on social media or TV, whatever. But the rule of thumb is you and I will have to see it 7 times in order to finally get the message. Repetition, repetition, repetition. So what's happened in the last 75 years is advertising has become incredibly more invasive and pervasive in our lives. It is everywhere in ways it was not even 50, 60 years ago. So it's become ever more invasive. You can't go anywhere without seeing advertising. But think about what the whole point has. What changed about advertising was 2 things. One is they began to think about, what if we took this product and tied it into human needs, right? So for example, look at some of the ads today and just analyze them. Like, what are some human needs? The need to love and be loved, okay, which is one of Maslow's hierarchy needs. Well, okay, so here's the woman using the shampoo, and she goes out on the street and her hair is really bouncy and so forth. And, sig others can't take their eyes off of her, and she's just, why? Because she uses this shampoo. Why should you use the whole point of the commercial is, you want love in your life, use this shampoo, right? It's that simple. You don't even have to open your mouth. In fact, please don't open your mouth. Just use the shampoo. You don't need it. Now, for you women, it's even more complicated because they got a product from your hair on down to your toes as to what product you need. So not enough you have nice hair. What about those eyebrows? Oh, what about those lashes? Oh, what about your lips? What about your face? On and on and on. There's a product for everything, because women in particular are, got caught up in this beauty myth kind of thing as a result of advertising, right? You want to be consumable by whoever is interested in you, you gotta look this way, okay? So that's one. I'll give you another one. I saw an ad a few weeks ago, and the woman is waxing her floor. And she's waxing, and she says, wait till my husband comes home and sees this floor. Is he gonna love me or what? Yeah, that's all you need. You want to have a good relationship, you need a good floor wax, right? Okay, so another one that I didn't see at this Thanksgiving, but it used to be 2-3 years in a row. Everybody's sitting around the Thanksgiving Day table, and one by one, the young people say, will you excuse me? Will you excuse me? Will you excuse me? Yes. So they leave the Thanksgiving Day table. Why? They go into the van, and they're all sitting in the van because that's where they really have bonding and togetherness, not the Thanksgiving Day table, in the van. So you want your family to come together. You don't need Thanksgiving. You need this van. Vans bring people together, right? Do we want to be together with a Absolutely. It's a great human need. Just buy this van, right? Or the kids are arguing, and the parents say, that's it. Get in the van. We're going to McDonald's. And they get to McDonald's. They get to McDonald's, and the happy music's playing, and all of a sudden the kids are talking to each other, and the mom and dad are smiling. What can't McDonald's do besides poisoning us to death? It's bringing families together, right? Just bring your family to McDonald's, and everything will be cool, right? Because you want family togetherness. McDonald's can do that for you too. So don't take my word for it. Look at the ads, okay? Now, that's okay, but we went down the rabbit hole a long time after that, because we began to actually identify with the products. And so we'd identify with the products in a way where, I don't know, I've heard a great example are pickup trucks. Listen to the pickup truck ads. You got some guy in a deep baritone voice, and they're trying to convince men, particular, who are interested in these pickup trucks. If you don't buy the right one, you're not manly enough. You're like a girly man. You got to get this pickup truck to be a true man, right? In fact, I said this one time in class, and a student said, "Well, that's absolutely true. You do have to get the right pickup truck to be considered masculine enough." I went, "Okay, boy, you bought the farm. All right, what else?" Or people will say, "Well, you know what? I'm a Ford man." What the hell's a Ford man? You identify with the product so much that you are this, you are the product. But it must be true, because think about it. Do I have anything on my shirt that's advertising the product? I don't know. But think about a Polo brand or whatever. They actually have the advertising for the company on your shirt. And so you are actually advertising for it. They ought to pay you, but in fact, you're advertising for them. Um, so, or we'll say things like, I love your clothes. Well, hell, we barely love each other, but we love inanimate objects. Love your dress. It can't even respond with love. So we love inanimate objects more than we do each other. So we got so caught up in it. Why? Because the ads are incredibly compelling. The ads, they spend a lot of money with psychologists even to get this thing in your head as to why you got to buy that product. And it works. Yeah. Almost in a subliminal way. If not a subliminal way, it gets you to want something you really don't need, but you got to get that product. The other aspect to it is it's also used as status, that we have products that we say, well, I'm better than you because I have this product. So, I have a Ferrari, so I'm a better person than you. And it reminds me of one of my favorite stories we had here on campus, the three, as they called themselves, the Gucci girls. And they came to class decked out in Gucci gear every day that I would see them. And I finally just asked, I'm curious, like, why you dress this way every day? You're so dressed up all the time. And they looked at me like incredulous, like, dumbass. We're the Gucci girls. Gucci, 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 Gucci. Don't you see? And I go, oh, okay, I guess I know nothing about fashion, as you can see. And I said, so what's that all about? And they said, we're better than these other students. Don't you see that? We're Gucci. They're not. We're better than they are. Better as people, yeah, is what they're trying to tell me. The upshoot of it is they were in the ethical life class, and they were actually going to their low-income community service site wearing their Gucci gear. And finally, the supervisor had called me and said, they can't do this here. And I said, I already had that conversation. And so I had to sit down with them again. You can't wear your Gucci gear when you go to there. It's making people feel bad. Come on. They still didn't understand it. They just went along with the fact they couldn't wear it there. Fine, whatever, Maynard. Okay. So I'll give you another one. I see this one every spring. Guy's standing there with his neighbor, and you can see all the lawns down the block. And the guy says to him, he says, your lawn is the greenest lawn on this block. And he goes, oh, thank you. That's because I use Scott's Turf Builder. Yeah, who wouldn't want that to have the greenest lawn on the block, And so we use products to identify with human needs, and we use products to compete with each other and show I'm better than you because I have this product. It kind of reminds me when we went back to the discussions about people who are welfare recipients, and I threw out the story about, well, when students say, well, I don't like the way these people are dressed, they're dressed this way and that way. I go, well, how would you like poor people to dress? And my point was, they don't want to be identified as poor. Why? Because we diss the poor. So they want to look just like the rest of us, right? Which is, again, part of the whole status thing. Not because they're trying to achieve high status, they're just trying to achieve not getting dissed for being poor. Anyway, so the advertising too is, do you ever notice, like, when the ads come on, they're louder on television? Why? Is because it's basically this simple. They know you're not in the room anymore. And so they're basically yelling, hey, you, I know you're out going to the bathroom or getting a beer or something out there. We're trying to pitch a product. Are you listening? Can you hear me? That's why the ads are louder, to get your attention. So even ads in magazines, that picture is taken because they know as you're thumbing through that magazine, they only got a nanosecond to make that impression on you. And that picture is carefully positioned. Everything about that picture is to get that image into your head when it flips by so that you'll know something about that product. So the advertising is everywhere. It's invasive. It's psychologically compelling. It's not surprising why we continue to buy stuff we don't even need. Well, has this focus on owning things facilitated by easy credit, I might add, to identification with products. The point is, the products are supposed to be substitutes for relationships, or will lead you to relationships. So instead of having relationships, you just need to get the product, which will ideally get you a relationship. But has this focus on things enhanced our happiness? This was indicated too in your last issue that you read about, but there's actually a whole field of psychology on happiness studies, or excuse me, on happiness. There's countless studies on them. And so most of the studies, in fact, all of the studies on happiness, if you go back 50, 60 years, these happiness scales show that while the scale of living has gone up like this, happiness has been flat. So if the whole idea is more stuff equals happiness, you know, that money can buy happiness, well then how come as we accumulated more and more things, we're not happy? In fact, I'd make the case we're less happy because depression is up 10 times over what it was 50 years ago. It's boom time for therapy. It's boom time for drugs as a way of alleviating anxiety and depression and so forth. You see the high suicide rates we have. A person commits suicide every 40 seconds here on the planet. And most of us are insecure physiologically. And so this has all worked. If this is where we're left right now, less happy than we ever were. Here's a quote from Parananhansa Yogananda. He said, "Possession of material riches without inner peace is like dying of thirst while bathing in a lake." Okay, now, as I ran on here, certainly we need to have a vision of what can be and advocate for policy change, structural change. So, for example, you know, I always have this vision of what humanity is capable of. And so I always envision, okay, so what's this, what policy is being proposed? And I think, does it take us in that direction? Like a couple of things I think about are, I endorse anything that I think is life sustaining. And I will vote against anything that's life denying, human life, natural life. So that which is life enhancing, I'm all for. That which is life denying, I'm against. So I have a couple of basic premises I use in judging policies because I think, you know, what humanity could be capable of. So the question is, does this policy take us in that direction or does it not? So that's just my personal guideline, but I'm saying we all have to have some vision of the world could be, because how else could you judge each policy as it comes down the line? And it's really important to, that was one of the whole premises of why I had you read these issues and do discussions on them, because you got to vote on these issues. These are all critical issues of our time. You got to make decisions on them. And so what decision will you make? And based on what criteria will you make them? So in order to have structural change, certainly we have to have policy changes, but structures won't change until we change individually and then collectively. So let me explain that. Think about it. The way the world is today is simply a matter of the collectivity of all 7.8 billion people's collective thinking, right? That's all it is. So what's inside is projected outside. So the world is nothing more than 7.8 billion individuals' collective thinking. Got it? Okay, so when have things changed over history? Because slowly but surely, a number of individuals changed, more and more individuals changed in their thinking until a critical mass was reached, in which case it then changed the entire culture. Okay, again, just to give you an example, laws are passed only when enough people in that society have reached that point where they're willing for that change to take place in the law. So laws got passed in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s because the people had changed enough to make that happen. So if you go back even 15 years ago, same-sex marriage was a non-starter in America. And then in 15 years, America dramatically changed its thinking about that. And then all of a sudden, same-sex marriage became a reality, okay? Because people's thinking changed, then the law changes. So cultures change when enough people's individual thinking changes to create a critical mass to change it. So my whole argument is, in addition to policy change, you have to think about how to change as individuals. But change to what, you may ask? Thank you. Well, life is a process of discovery and realization, not learning. Well, what are we here to learn? Nothing. It's a process of discovery and realization of what? Our true identity. Now, what do you think is the grand cosmic question? You know, like in the nature of reality, what's the grand cosmic question? Now, I used to think it was like, well, why are we here and what's going to happen when we are not physically here anymore, and on and on. But those are all important questions. And is there a creator, and what's the nature of the creator? All incredibly important questions. But the grand cosmic question is, who are you? Patanjali, back in the year 1000, was the person who developed what we refer to as yoga. At that time, yoga, it means union, yoke. And so union with what? The creator. That real self-realization is about union with the creator. Anyway, the system of yoga, which now we tend to think of yoga as the physical postures, which are very important and are a meditation unto themselves. But in Patanjali's system, the physical postures were to prepare the body to be able to sit for endless hours in sitting meditation. And so some forms of yoga include the meditation and some do not. No judgment call. I'm simply saying true yoga includes the physical postures and the sitting meditation. Anyway, Patanjali said, false identification is the central form of ignorance. Okay, so who are you is with what do you identify? And he said the problem is we falsely identify, and that's why we're ignorant of our true state. Now, again, ignorance means we don't know any better. Stupidity means we know better and we do it anyway, at least in the world according to Maynard. So think about the things we've learned to identify with. So if I wrote on the board, I am, and then question mark, how do you want to finish the sentence? Think about the things we say in response to that. So we've identified with our jobs, which is a big one. You know, it's like when you ask a little kid, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? You don't expect the kid to say bigger. What you're fishing for is the kid's occupation, right? So I am my job, okay? Or I am my name, or I am my skin color, or I am my things, as we talked about people identifying with their things, or my nationality, or my ethnicity, or my sexual orientation, all of which have importance, relevance at a certain level of existence, but all of which are not who we really are. Okay, let me slip on to a little bit of a cosmology story so I can set the scene for where I'm going to go next. It's interesting because when I teach my metaphysics class, I spend the first day of class just asking everybody, so please do explain the nature of reality. And it's kind of comical because if students have an opinion at all, it's kind of all over the place and they basically parrot back what they've been told. Without ever having done any critical thinking on it, which is fine. It's just an observation. But when I ask the critical questions, a lot of, what's that got to do with me? Well, see, if you want to live your life in a meaningful way, you got to have some understanding about what the nature of reality is and why we're here in the first place. Yes. How else can you live it in a meaningful way? Now, you can just go through life the way most people do and just get caught up in all this, and that's fine. Okay, no judgment involved, but it's because there's, your understanding of reality is probably kind of limited to just what's being presented in front of you instead of thinking even deeper about it. So I would suggest, oh, so the cosmology story. All right. So in the beginning was the creator, however you imagine the creator to be. Now, first of all, let me say when people say, well, first of all, I don't believe in God, that's fine. Um, if you're an atheist, atheism is a no profit religion. Get it? No profit. Jokes haven't improved, have they? Okay, so that's fine. But it's pretty interesting because a couple of renowned statisticians did a statistical analysis on the probability of there being no intelligence to the universe, however you imagine that to be, a creator or something. But there is all kinds of evidence that there is an intelligent design to the universe. And I don't mean that by the Christian version of intelligent design. I just mean that there's intelligence behind all this. And they said that the odds against there being some sort of intelligent design based on all the evidence and all the facts is the same odds of you winning the lottery 20 weeks in a row, or you finding a specific atom you were looking for somewhere in the universe and you found it. In other words, it's almost impossible that there isn't some sort of intelligent design behind the universe. Okay, so in the beginning was the creator, and the creator knew that the creator was all that is. But the creator, and we talked about this earlier in the semester, is the difference between knowledge and experience. And so you can, as you're growing up, you're told, like, oh, it's wonderful when you fall in love. Yes, but you really don't know until you experience it. Or it's wonderful when you have kids, unless they grow up to disappoint you. Until you actually have them, you really don't know, right? You have to experience it. Okay, so in the beginning was the creator, and the creator was all that is. And the creator knew that it was all that is, and the creator knew that it was perfect love, because all that is perfect love. God is perfect love. The creator is perfect love. However, the creator could not experience it because the creator is all that is. In other words, there's no subject-object relationship. So this is called different things by different people. But at 0 point, the creator developed the concept of what if through us, by individuating itself into us and all the parts of nature and everything, that through us and all the aspects of nature, the creator, like a mirror, could then experience itself through our experiences. Okay? So that was the plan. And this is really some of the Adam and Eve stories and the Genesis stories and creation stories all have a similar kind of overriding theme. But this is ultimately what was going on according to different versions I've read about it. Okay, so the creator determines that the physical reality setting will be a setting where love appears not to be. And so instead, you have to have its opposite, because how else could you experience it? Now, let me explain that first of all. Let's suppose you and I got on a plane and we went to the North Pole, and we visited with some natives who lived there, and we got on a plane and rolled up and said, man, how do you handle this cold? Now, let's assume these people knew nothing else about the world. All they knew is their little world there. Well, the response would probably be, what's cold? It'd be like going to the fish and say, hey, how do you like the water? What's water? Okay. They go, oh, I get it. All you know is cold. So let's get on our plane. You get on the plane with us. We're going down to the equator. Now you've experienced heat. Now you know what cold is, right? The only way you can experience something is to experience its opposite, right? That's why this is called the plane of relativity, yin yang. That's what those symbols in. So we have up, we have down, we have left, we have right, we have cold, we have hot. And it's purposefully set up that way so that you can experience the all of it, right? And so you can't experience you unless there was you that is not, for example, but that's a whole other discussion. But anyway, you get the drift? And so this is on purpose. So we come into this to experience love where love appears not to be. So who we are then is a spiritual being of perfect love, because we are made in the Creator's image, and the Creator is perfect love. We are spiritual beings on a human trip, not human beings on a spiritual trip. We are spiritual beings on a human trip. Our mission in life is to realize that and act accordingly, act to our divine self, right? That's why the simple message in the New Testament of the Bible was love one another. That is who we are. But wait, there's more. Universally, what are some of the characteristics we attribute to the Creator? Well, we say the Creator is all powerful, okay? And we say the Creator is perfect love. And we say the Creator is all knowing, omniscient. There's nothing the Creator doesn't know. And the Creator is omnipresent. The Creator is everywhere and everything. Okay, so you may recall or not, we had a little bit of a discussion on quantum physics, and I wrote on the board Einstein's famous formula, E equals matter times the speed of light squared, EMC with a small square, meaning energy equals matter times, in other words, matter is a slower vibration. When it's vibrating faster, it becomes energy. So they transfer back and forth. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just converts to matter and matter back to energy. Okay, but I also suggested to you, and I showed you on the board an analogy, or I showed you mentally an analogy, a thought thing about what activates things in quantum reality is consciousness. And so everything in quantum reality is in superposition. All wave packets are in superposition. They're nothing until they're observed by consciousness. And once observed by consciousness, it becomes a wave or it becomes a particle. Now, just as an aside, an interesting point about that is the big argument in physics for the last 100 years has been, yeah, that's all true at the subatomic level, but that can't possibly explain things in the greater reality. And so the argument for some physicists has been, yeah, that explains quantum reality, but it doesn't explain the physical reality we experience day to day, which is an interesting assumption, because if you're saying that and I go, okay, but if you go and look into a chair or any physical object, you would see the quantum reality I just discussed, right? That everything is in superposition and it doesn't become a wave or a particle until it's observed. That consciousness is the activating mechanism. And I gave you the big example of, so this means literally, if you're in your kitchen and you leave the room and everybody's out of the kitchen, the room goes back into superposition. It's not a room anymore until it's again observed, boom, then it snaps back into being the room that you expect to observe. Okay, so having said this, energy equals matter equals consciousness. Now, one of the arguments is that, well, this can't be true of this greater reality, but you know, they've done more and more experiments where they're working up to bigger and bigger levels of physical reality, and they show it's still true. So now they're up to working with what are called buckyballs, which are conglomerations of molecules, and they find that it still applies at that level, that the buckyballs are in superposition until observed by consciousness, and then they become whatever it is they are physically. And so they continue to work this up to higher and higher levels of physical matter to show that this is, in fact, the nature of reality, which is like, that was a mysterious whistle in case you didn't catch that. Okay, so that means energy, matter, consciousness are all one and the same thing. And so the universe appears to be composed of an infinite field of energy, information, probabilities with the following attributes. It's the foundation for all of physical reality, all powerful creation. So quantum physicists, this is the nature of that. They describe it as nothing more than energy and information. Kind of like, to give you a physical analogy, if you ever watched the first Matrix movie and at the end, Neo finally sees reality for what it is and he just sees this field of information and energy. It's exactly how quantum physics describes it. And so It's the foundation for all of physical reality, all powerful creation, omnipresent. This information and energy is everywhere. So, again, I am not saying that quantum physics confirms mysticism. What I am saying is quantum physics is not at odds with what many of the mystics argue is the nature of reality. So, to finish the equation, energy equals matter equals consciousness equals the creator. Well, to me, one of the most profound things in the Bible is in the New Testament where it says, God is love. Not God's a loving dude, God is love. And so if you go back to the equation, energy equals matter equals consciousness equals the creator. The emotional manifestation of the creator is love because God is love. And so that's all part of the equation too. Everything is love. The Beatles were right. All you need is love. All there is love. That's exactly correct. That is the nature of reality. You, me, everything you see is love, right? Now, when you feel this, the emotional expression is love. And sometimes you will see, like if you look at the Gospel of St. John, it's the most probably mystical one of the four Gospels. And they keep talking about the light, the white light. So we're also beings of light, light beings, points of consciousness here in the universe. So the physical expression is light, and everything is a manifestation of God. Yet love is more than an emotion. The mystical teacher, Dr. David Hawkins, said, love is misunderstood to be an emotion. Actually, it is a state of awareness, a way of being in the world, a way of seeing oneself and others. And why is awareness important? In the words of Anthony DeMello, who is a priest and spirituality author and speaker, he said, what you are aware of, you are in control of. What you are not aware of is in control of you. So you may recall at one point at the last lecture before the, presentation on chapter 25, I pointed out about being here now being one of the great mystical concepts. And the idea is that we should be present at all times. In other words, that your mind, body, and spirit should be physically devoted to wherever you are and whatever you're doing at that moment, not your mind drifting off into something else as you're physically somewhere. So in other words, you're hanging on my every word right now. Your entire energy, your entire concentration is hanging on my every thought. That would be being in the present moment. Or if you're taking a walk in the woods and you're just observing nature and you're not thinking about anything, what you're going to do that day, you're just totally locked into nature. You're meditating, you're in the present moment. Or if you're doing the dishes and all you're thinking about is doing the dishes, and you're just focusing on doing the dishes, not what you're going to do later, whatever, you're meditating. Okay, these are all forms of meditation. You know, one of my favorites is just listening to music. I just get totally lost in music. I'm not thinking about everything else, just listening to music. Okay, so that's being aware. You can't be aware if you're not present in the now moment. Because if you're physically somewhere and your mind's somewhere else, you're clearly not aware of what's going on around you. Right? Couldn't be. You know, you can't devote your attention to two things at the same time. It's not possible. Anyway, so universally we are made in God's image. Therefore, like the creator, we are co-creators of the universe. We are responsible for all that takes place in the world. You know, remember after 9/11, we had posters on the walls that people could kind of vent and just talk about what was going on in a way and express themselves. And I remember one person wrote, why would God allow this to happen? And I wrote underneath, why did we allow this to happen? Now, why? Because throughout this course, I'm not saying this is the way it is. I'm saying this is what the mystics say it is that we have total free will. And total free will means no exceptions. You can't have free will with exceptions. Then it's not total free will. You either have free will about everything or you don't. So the mystics all say we have total free will, which makes sense. So if the idea is that through us, the creator experiences everything, well, then if we didn't have free will, how could the creator experience everything? Because we wouldn't have free will to do whatever it is we want to do. And so the understanding is that this is like, I don't know, a giant playground. And it's like when you send your kids out to play in the yard, you don't sit there and worry about what the heck they're going to do all day. Just, you hope they don't get hurt, but if they do, they'll live on and all. But you just go out and play. And so this is like Disney World. And the creator said, go out and play. I don't care what you do. Do whatever you want to do because you have total free will. You want to kill, kill. You want to love, love. There is no judgment involved here. You have total free will. So here's the true nature of reality and our relationship to the creator. And because everything is one thing in the universe, and that is God, we're all part of that one thing. We are all connected. We are all brothers, sisters, fellow travelers. And that's why, for example, in the East, when people greet each other, they will often use the term namaste. And namaste says, I see your skin color. I see what sex you are. I, may learn your ethnicity. And I recognize that, and I recognize that's an important part of your existence here. But I see further than that. I see the soul that you are and realize we are the same. We are all souls. Okay, now think about this. You often hear the expression, well, we're all one. There's the oneness. Okay, what does that refer with a capital O? What does that refer to? So think about this. If in fact we are all manifestations of God, that means we are all God. That means there's 7.8 billion versions of God, all the physical bodies you see. And yet there's only one of us because it's just God in 7.8 billion different forms, let alone all the aspects of nature, which are also manifestations of God. And so when people have achieved enlightenment, when they've achieved realization, here's what they've understood. And when you read about people who have achieved enlightenment, here's what they say. They say, because I realized I am God. That's enlightenment, to realize you are in fact God. Okay. So how does this play out structurally, policy-wise? Let's assume for a moment we all assumed, we all understood, we all firmly believed that when you see another person, it's another soul, no better or worse than you. Even if you can't go far enough to go, well, you are God. But you just, hey, we're all souls here. We're all souls of perfect love. Well, then we'd immediately feed everybody. Yeah, because why wouldn't you? When I say to people, would you feed your family? Well, of course I'd feed my family. Well, why don't you feed these people in Somalia? Well, they're not my family. Au contraire, they are. They're all part of the human family. You see? So just that one change in thinking would change everything. Will we continue to have wars? Well, no, because we'd understand that it's absolutely pointless, that everything you do to another, you're in fact doing to yourself, because there's only one of us, right? And so it's sort of like fingers on the hand, and you go, boom, I'm going to get that finger. Oh man, that hurt. Because at this level of reality, you don't see them as all belonging to the same hand. At this level, you just see four separate individuals, and you don't understand at a higher level of consciousness, they're all connected to the same hand. So everything in the universe is interconnected and interpenetrated, and everything we do affects everything else in the universe, and everything else in the universe affects us. Here's another one of my sound bites. Did you ever think about the word universe? Universe, it means one song, universe. We move individually, collectively, from we're all separate and competing with each other to we are all one and cooperate with one another. So that we realize, as it says in the New Testament, am I my brother's keeper? You go to the next level and realize you are your brother. But wait, there's more. Let's move from the macro to the micro. Jesus, the amazing prophet who is made divine, as we all are. See, here's what I would suggest to you. if you think of Jesus and just look at Jesus in a slightly different way, what you would get if you ever read the other gospels, in addition to the four that are in the Bible, there's many more gospels out there. And in the other gospels, it's very clear that Jesus is trying to show us what we are all capable of, that he is not the one, the only. In fact, when people said to him, "Are you the Son of God?" And he said, "Yes, I am, but ye are all my brethren," meaning you too are the sons and daughters of God. He never made the claim he was, in fact, that was the whole point. He was trying to show us our divinity through him as a role model, which is the same thing Buddha was trying to do, the same thing Krishna was trying to do. They're all trying to show us you are divine. You just don't realize it yet. Okay, so Jesus said we need to learn to be in this world, but not of this world. Well, what does that mean? Okay, so there's a difference between the absolute realm and the relative realm. And I already described the relative realm as our 3D reality, where yin yang appears, where the opposites appear. Okay, so I said earlier, I'll get back to this. I said, okay, so the problem for the creator was the creator had to create a situation, a living experience for us to experience love where love appears not to be. So, like experiencing heat, you can't do it without cold. You can't experience up without experiencing down. And so, what would be the opposite of love? And it's fear. Now, I know they may say, well, it's hate and all that. Hate's a manifestation of fear. So, it's fear. Okay, so let's go back to my example of, let's say on this side is the absolute realm, which is beyond where we are now, or so it seems. And over here is where we are now, our 3D reality. And so Jesus said the idea is to be in this world, but not of this world. Okay, so in the absolute realm, so for want of a better way, before and after your death, when you're in heaven, that's the absolute realm. So when I went back to my original thing and I said, okay, think about things we identify with. And so I would write, I am, and then question mark, and you'd finish it. Okay, so I am is in the relative realm. Is in the absolute realm, like heaven, and your answer is in the relative realm. Okay, so why do I say this? Okay, let's go back to Moses. You might have heard of Moses. Okay, so Moses it's in the Old Testament. It's in the Bible. It's a good book. Moses is meeting God on the mountain, and God's given him his running orders. And he said, "Oh, listen, I want you to go to the Pharaoh and you tell him what up, what uppeth." That's how they talked in that time. And so he's telling him, tell him this, tell him that, tell him this. And Moses going, whoa, pumpeth thy brakes. You see, the Pharaoh is mighty. And, I need some cred. I can't just go in there and say, hey, here's what's up. So suck it up, Pharaoh. Who shall I say sent me? Give me some cred here. And what was God's response? He said, tell him I am sent you. Okay, so I am is another word for the creator. I am. And so that's really important. So here's my point. When I talk about identity, when you finish your sentence with all those identifiers, that's fine, because it is part of who you are in this reality, but it's not the sum total who you are. The other interesting thing is whatever it is with which you identify, you're going to defend. So if you identify with your sexual orientation or your skin color or your sex, you're going to defend that. And the more strongly you identify, the more defensive you're going to be, which can get in the way of people when we're being defensive. Okay, so let's think about the absolute realm. I am none of the others. And so think of yourself that way. You just are. And so when people, I'll give you an applied way of looking at it. So when people say, are you Maynard? No, well, my name's Maynard. I'm not Maynard. It's just my name. Are you a social worker? Well, I practice social work. I'm not a social worker. Are you a vegetarian? Well, I eat a vegetarian diet. Like, what's a vegetarian? Like carrots coming out of your head or whatever. So are you a professor? Well, I profess. You see, these are all action statements. They aren't who I am. right? And so the basic understanding is to get to the point where you just go, well, I am. There is nothing else. I'm not my clothes. I'm not the, you're not even your body. What is the first thing the mystics say? Is you are not your mind and you are not your body. Right? You're none of those things. You just are. I just am. You just be. Be, are, am are all part of the same thought stream. Just exist. Right? We are human beings as a verb. We are humans being. Just be. Or the Beatles, let it be. Just be. Be what? Just be. Just be yourself. Just take each day and just do. Just go with the moment and just be. That's all you have to do. Just be. Okay. So what else is in the absolute realm? Well, love. It's perfect love. But here, it's love and fear. In the perfect realm is there is no ego. Whereas here, we're ego invested as crazy, our ego's attached to our clothes, to our belongings, to our achievements, to our grades. Ego, 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 right? Yeah, you need an ego, but you can't let the ego be dictating your life by identifying with everything. You remember when I talked about discussions and having discussions, I said early on the semester, if you think you are your thoughts, think again, because you say, well, you don't like my idea. It's not your idea. It just came through your head. And the fact that you think of it as my idea, possession, is why you're going to argue so much, because you're going to get defensive because your ego is attached to the idea. Detach your ego from everything. It's not necessary for you to function. And you will watch, take my word for it, watch how often your ego gets in your way. So on the absolute realm, it's total inner peace. It's total bliss, total joy. Not the same as happiness, because happiness in the relative realm has its corollary, which is unhappiness, right? No, we're talking about inner peace. The inner peace of it doesn't matter what's happening in your life, you still have inner peace. The great mystic Krishnamurti, now think about this and what he said when they asked him, why are you always at such perfect peace? And he said, because I don't mind whatever happens. Now think about that. If you really didn't mind whatever happens, you're okay with whatever happens, you too would be at peace, because it doesn't matter what's happening. You just are. I just am. I'm at peace. It doesn't matter what's happening. Nothing's going to change my world, to quote the Beatles. Okay, and you would be in the present moment at all times, because in the absolute realm, there is no such thing as time. There's only time in the relative realm. And I pointed out to you that Einstein demonstrated that 100 and some years ago, 120 years ago, that there is no time, no such thing as time. It's just an invention we came up with in order to negotiate things in 3D reality. Okay, so in the relative realm, first of all, let's examine fear. Fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. Okay, false evidence appearing real. What do I mean by that? Because every fear you and I have ever had is simply a mental construct. It's just something we made up in our head. Nothing external is fearful, right? It's only what you think about it that causes fear. And I used the example in the class before. I said, okay, so you may say, well, what if the room's on fire? Of course you would feel fear. It depends on what you think about it. If you think about, oh my God, the room's on fire, we're all going to die, of course you're going to feel fear, because your thoughts create the emotional reaction. And the emotional reaction results in a bodily feeling that you feel sick, okay, or anxious, or a tightness in your chest, right? But your thoughts create the emotional reaction. Now, if instead you said, yeah, okay, the room's on fire, but we're all going to get out of here, it's going to be okay, then you're not going to feel fear, or you're going to feel a lot less fear. So same situation, the room's on fire, it all depends what you think about it, because nothing in and of itself causes fear. It's only what you think about it that does. So fear is false evidence appearing real. It's simply a mental construct. Okay, so what else is aspects of fear? Is hate, sadness, loneliness, insecurity, depression, anxiety, anger. And these aren't necessarily negative things. For example, you could get angry enough that it finally drives you to make changes in your life. So I'm simply saying they're all part of the emotions. Uh, and here, time appears to be real when in fact it's not. It's all part of the relative realm, and necessarily so. So we could experience it all. Okay, I'm going to lay another big thing on you. What the ancients refer to this relative realm is Maya, meaning the great illusion. It's not real. It's just a dream. It just appears to be real. It's so compelling. It's just like every dream you've had. Have you ever had dreams where you wake up in the middle of the night, you're in a cold sweat, or you're fearful, whatever, because that dream seems so real, and you wake up and go, that was just a dream. To your waking self, to your sleeping self, this is a dream. Remember the old thing, merrily, 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 life is but a dream? Okay, so this is an illusion. It's not real. Now think about it. Think about just some aspects of that. When I said with quantum physics, nothing occurs, nothing appears to be real. In other words, if I said, look at your desk or look at your chair or look at your computer, looks solid enough, right? But if you really got down to the subatomic level, you realize it's 99.9999999% empty space. It's not. It just appears to be real, and it appears to be solid when in fact it's not. Or that things don't actually materialize until observed by consciousness. All right. So that all hints at some of what I'm saying here, that the mystics say this is all a dream. It's an illusion. It's not real. I have a book where it's by 5 different mystics, all contributing from 5 different time periods in history. And it's all different sayings they have about how this is not real. You have to understand this is not real. It just appears to be real. And it has to be, because otherwise, how would it get a real reaction out of us if we just thought it was a dream? But at another level, that's nonetheless what it is, according to the great mystics. Okay. So we have free will. And as a result, every day choices will present themselves to you, and you can choose either love or fear, right? Because everything we do is motivated by love or by fear. Everything. Yeah. And if you go even deeper to that, it's all stems from love, because even fear is ultimately a fear of a lack of love, right? Because love is what we are, right? And if we don't have love, we talked about this with kids growing up. Why has this kid got emotional problems? Because somewhere down the line, he or she didn't get enough love from his or her parents, right? And that we all need love. That's who we are. That's what makes us thrive, you know? And it's why when you feel love, you feel your connection with God, right? And when you don't feel love, you feel like you're disconnected from, when you feel disconnected from God, you don't feel love, and vice versa. That's why the Roman Catholic Church some years ago said there is no such place as hell. It's just the state of mind of when you feel separated from God. And that's why Jesus said heaven is a state of mind, right? That it's not a physical place, it's a state of mind. Okay, so let's go back again to the absolute realm. I'm going to tell you another story from a spiritual book I read one time. And this guy wakes up in front of his 2 friends, and he said, oh my gosh, I had the most amazing dream. And he describes like 75 years of a life. And he gets done describing his dream, and the 2 people who are standing with him said, well, that's pretty interesting, as you're just asleep here for 10 minutes. So the argument is, we have always been and always are in heaven, so to speak. We never left it, even as we are participating in this dream called 3D reality. We never actually left, right? We're always here. It kind of reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. And in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is wondering how she can get back home, right? Back to the absolute realm, for the purposes of our analogy here, our metaphor. And she said, and the good witch said, just click your heels, because you have never left. You always were home. And so are we. We are always home. We are always in the absolute realm. That's what Jesus meant when he said to be in this world, but not of this world. So we recognize we are part of the everlasting, never changing, ever eternal world, even as we participate in this ever-changing world. Okay. And so before we were born, we were in this absolute realm. And when we physically die, we go back to the realm, although we've never actually left it. We just don't realize it when we're here. Okay, so first of all, why do we enter this realm? Well, for the simple reason that we, when we understand that we're perfect love, and that's awesome, but we want to experience that love. And so we come back time after time after time again to experience this love. And we choose different time frames because all's happening at once. So you can insert yourself any place you want. And you have different family, different skin color, perhaps. And so that you can experience, and this time it'll be with a poor family in, I don't know, South Africa, and it's going to be in the 1700s. And so that's what I want to experience. Now, once you're born, quote, quote, born, then it's total free will, right? And it's improv theater because there is no script. You just set up circumstances for yourself. So perhaps in one life, I was a world-class athlete, certainly ain't this one. And in another life, perhaps I wanted to experience what it was like to be physically crippled and debilitated so that I could experience that too. And so when people say, well, you know, it's like to be a woman, I go, hundreds of lifetimes as a woman. You know, it's like to have dark skin. Oh, sure, I've had dark skin in other lifetimes. And so we experience all of it for our personal purposes. And through us, God experiences all that is. Now, let me just say something about Judgment Day, just to finish off some of the what I've read, that Judgment Day is misunderstood. Now, think about it. How could we have perfect will and then still have to obey certain commandments? It doesn't even make sense. And so you can't have both, right? And so the idea is you have perfect, you can do whatever you want. And those original commandments were really guidelines to create stability in society. They weren't holy transgressions as we've come to understand them as we've, created the organized religion around those thoughts. But anyway, that's why in the East, the key issue is ignorance. And in the West, we call it sin, but sin is just another way of looking at ignorance of our true nature, of our true understanding of reality. Okay, so what happens is, according to several versions I read, is when we physically die, again, you always were, you were totally eternal. And so when we die, what happens is we have what's called the life review, which has been misunderstood as Judgment Day. And in the life review, we literally watch everything that happened in our lives very dispassionately, but we see it from the perspective of everybody whose life we touched. And so suddenly we realize, wow, at the time I didn't realize how much that hurt somebody or how much that helped somebody, whatever. But you suddenly see it through that person's eyes if you haven't already. And so it gives you information about what you might want to do in the next lifetime if you choose, because you don't have to come back here again. You can go to a gazillion other realities. You don't have to come back to this one again. But why do we come back? Because after we die, physically die, we return back to the oneness. And then we realize again, like the candle returns to the great light. So the 7.8 billion candles return to the one great light, which is the creator. And so we realize, oh my gosh, I am perfect love. But you know what? I want to experience it. So we come back again. And the other reason why we come back? Because we love the drama, particularly if you're living in residence halls. Okay. So getting back to every day, choices will present us, whether or not we want to choose love or fear. Now, let me go back to we are co-creators of the universe. And something I left you with at the end of the chapter 25 discussion is there are those mystics who argue that we physically create our own reality, that individually we create our personal reality, and collectively we create the greater reality, including even the weather, that we create it all, which would kind of make sense because that would give us the ability to free will to create circumstances that we want to experience in order to just experience them or to learn something about ourselves or to challenge us in some way. It's an interesting thing I read one time is that you can do anything you want, including commit suicide, But when we commit suicide, we instantly recognize that we kind of made a mistake, for want of a better way to put it, because the very thing that caused us to commit suicide, those very circumstances, were the very circumstances that we wanted to present to ourselves in this lifetime, to see if we could face them and take it to the next level and overcome those circumstances. So here's what the mystics say: there are no such things as accidents in the universe. Everything happens purposefully. So everything that presents itself to you is according to, some people say, well, it's according to God's plan. Well, God's plan is your plan. Whatever you want to happen, you can make happen. And the absolute miracle of the universe is that whatever you want and what another person wants, if it's something that's going to, mean the two of you need to come together, the universe will bring you together. So everyone who comes into your life happened purposefully. Right. And then you have to think about, okay, so why are you in my life? And I've actually gotten to that point sometimes when I haven't seen people and I say, so why are you back in my life? Do you have any thoughts? I mean, I don't know. Why are we here? Why are we engaged with each other? So anyway, that's the school of thought of one creates one's own reality. And so, every day we are faced with choice to choose love or fear, and you create those opportunities for yourself. And if you decide not to choose that opportunity at that time, and you choose like, oh, I can't choose love. See, choosing love takes more courage. For example, if you have a grudge against somebody, you can say, well, you know what, practice forgiveness, because that's an act of love. That's very difficult to do sometimes. But in practicing forgiveness, it takes great courage. Like, I'm going to forget the fact you killed a family member of mine, and I'm going to overlook that and forget that. I'll remember that you did, but I'm not going to judge you for that. And I will still embrace you, and see if we can't try to understand what took place there, and what the implications are for you and for me, and for those of us who are left behind from the loss of our loved one. What does it all mean for us, right? And so every time you choose love, you grow a little bit and you spread a little bit of light into the universe. And every time you choose fear, you don't grow and you spread a little darkness. Now, that's not a judgment. It's simply an observation, because don't worry, as they said in Star Wars, another opportunity will present itself, because you didn't take advantage of it this time. And so it's going to present itself to you again until you finally get the message. This isn't happening accidentally. It's happening for a reason. So take advantage of it. You're presenting it to yourself. Okay. Another thing I wanted to point out to you in terms of our divinity is whenever Jesus would perform a miracle, the first thing Jesus did was he would thank God for what was about to happen. In other words, not asking. He was so sure he could do this that, and he would, and there are no miracles as such. It's only our misunderstanding about how we can manipulate physical reality that we don't understand. And so when he get done performing the miracle, and people would go, no wayeth, and he would go, wayeth, and they go, no wayeth. He go, wayeth, you just saw it. He'd always finish with, these things and more you can do too. I'm just showing you how. Okay, let me give you another example. There was a guy in South India, I actually have videos of him, called Sai Baba. And Sai Baba could create things out of nothing. I mean, he could literally, it wasn't tricks. It's not a magic trick. He didn't have long sleeves or anything. He could literally, out of thin air, create a rose and give it to you, and that rose would never die. I have a video of him with a small pouch of his magic dust. And there's a vase that must be like, I don't know, it reached up to here on him. And he's dumping this little bit of, out of this little cloth container, he's dumping stuff in. Well, he is dumping into that thing for like 5 minutes and it's still not filled, right? So here's the vase, almost as big as him, and here's this little sack, and it never empties. It never empties, right? So I watched another video where he literally reached into a fire and he pulled out a chain with an amulet on it, And again, it's not a trick. It's just he could literally manipulate physical reality. And this is nothing new because Jesus could do it. He did it. He's not the only, these aren't the only two either. If you read autobiography of a yoga, you will see how yogas can manipulate reality. So, he's just trying to show us what we're all capable of doing because we too are divine. Anyway, so it's Sai Baba's 70th birthday. And reporters, because people come from all around the world to meet with Sai Baba and enjoy his grace. And when you're around people like that, you can feel their presence, their difference, that they're at not a higher level than you, but that they're at a different level of consciousness than we are. You can just feel it about them. Um, anyway, that's why Jesus had a following. That's why Sai Baba has a following. That's why all these people who achieved enlightenment had their followings, because you could see, you could feel they were different than us and yet the same. So they said to Sai Baba on his 70th birthday, well, do you think you're God? And he said, well, yes, I do. And they said, well, don't you think that's kind of arrogant to think that way? And he says, oh, no, 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 my friend. He said, the only difference between you and me is I realize I'm God and you haven't realized that you are too. This is the message, right? This is the message. Okay. So getting back to there's a direction to humanity. I think this is the direction to humanity, for us to all have the opportunity to achieve this divinity and to understand this divinity, that we are divine. Um, Getting back to the macro level, do you think that we have constructed a fear-based reality or a love-based reality? Well, it seems clear to me it's all about fear. It's palpable. You can feel the fear. Um, Watch how, if you examine how the Trump administration operated, it was based entirely on making people feel fearful. And that somehow, he would offer the solutions to the fear that he was in fact creating with his different policy approaches and explanations of reality. Um, so as a result of a fear-based reality, we compete with each other for food, clothing, and shelter because we fear there's not enough to go around. I already demonstrated there is enough to go around. There's enough to feed everybody on the planet 1.5 times. And if everybody in the United States, if we divvied up all the wealth in the United States, each man, woman, and child would have $750,000. So there is plenty to go around. But because we're afraid, we compete. Now think about it. Isn't cooperation closer to love? Right? And so we once did. For most of human history, we cooperated economically. Now we compete with economically. And I'm not saying back in the old days it was all one kumbaya. I'm simply saying that our essential nature, at least for most of our human history, has been to cooperate, not compete for food, clothing, and shelter. Now, part of the problem is because we believe in our biological aspect only, rather than realize that we're more than our biology, that we are souls, that we are spiritual beings on a human trip. So we say, oh, we're like animals and we compete with territory. Yes, the biological aspect of ourselves does do that, but it's mind over matter. We are more than that. And we don't love ourselves and one another as we should, because most of us don't have the resources, the opportunity, and we don't have the resource and the opportunity to self-actualize as we go up Maslow's hierarchy and to be all that you can be, let alone ever achieve to and ascend to unitive consciousness. Well, because we created this mess, we can change this mess, right? This is nothing more than a continuous creation every day, just like the symbolic interaction approach. We create it this way every day and continue to recreate it. But can we change it? Will we change it? Wayne Dyer said, heaven on earth is a choice you must make, not a place we must find. Bob Dylan, might have heard of him, Robert Zimmerman. He said, the times they are a-changing. Okay, so while there's biological evolution, I believe there's also evolution of consciousness for all of humanity. And there's actually been books written about this where they try to characterize what have been the great epics in humanity. So just to give you an example, we reached a point where most of humanity no longer believes that there's magical explanations to the universe. So in other words, that if we sacrifice a virgin, every spring we'll have a good harvest. That's just magical thinking. Or even the voodoo doll, if I hit this voodoo doll that's designed of my enemy and I hit it with a pin in the butt, my enemy's going to feel that in his butt. It's just magical thinking. So, but we once believed all that, right? So we've evolved in consciousness beyond that is what I'm trying to say. So some of the great evolutions in consciousness were, number one, the Enlightenment, and with the Enlightenment, that 200, 300-year period going back to the Renaissance, during that period of time, the human species collectively moved up into a higher level of consciousness. And so that didn't mean everybody in lockstep did, because even at that time, there were still many who believed in magical thinking, and there were some who were even beyond that in a higher level of thinking. But enough people, enough individuals changed their thinking enough that all of humanity moved to the next level of consciousness as a result of individuals changing in their worldview and their thinking. As a result was the Enlightenment. So all those amazing people of the Enlightenment like Newton and Galileo and the great artists and democracy coming out of the Enlightenment, all that was a result of the change in consciousness, is what I would suggest to you, that created people like Galileo and produced people like Newton and produced the founding fathers. It was the change in consciousness that resulted in what we call the Enlightenment. So the next great period started around 1945 and was first evidenced in the beatniks and later on in the hippies and the whole 1960s. Okay, so, back at that time, it's not like we sat around and this is impersonation of guy smoking joint. I believe we're experiencing a change in consciousness. Nah. We weren't aware at the time. In fact, it was just the opposite. We were pretty self-absorbed and thought, oh my God, look at all these changes we're creating. Again, the ego thing. And, not realizing there was a greater thing going on here. So a change in consciousness, that we're moving up to the next level of understanding, the next level of consciousness. And it was expressed through the hippies and the beatniks and others, and all the changes that took place during that period of time, continuing and now, are all a function of a higher level of consciousness. Now think about it. Isn't one of the great things that we talk about today inclusiveness, and that we recognize that we're all here together, and it doesn't matter what your skin color is, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, your sexual orientation, none of that matters. It matters, but at another level, hey, we're all here together. You see the trend. It's a higher level of thinking than it was prior to that, where we would have wars over it. Now, having said that, we're still at what's called the ethnocentric level. 80% of us are still there, even though we're at a higher level of consciousness. So at this level, what we believe is that, there's your way and there's my way, and my way is better than your way, and I'll even fight you over it, whether it's religion, skin color, whatever. Okay, so the next level up is my way is a different way, but not a better way. It's just a different way. And of course, I wouldn't fight you over it. And the highest level is there's only one way, right? And we're all a part of it. That's unitive consciousness. Okay, now going back to the 60s, I know sometimes I get this rap from people going, man, what sellouts you hippies were. Look how, it was you guys who elected Reagan in the 80s and, all became conservative. No. See, that's a misunderstanding of the 60s. A study was done by a group called the Cultural Creatives Project. And they found that back in the 60s, only 5% of the population of hippies, or population in the United States, I should say, fit the definition of hippie. Now, hippie means not only the three great pillars of sex, drugs, rock and roll. Just a moment. Not just that, but also radical politics, that we need a new way of thinking. We need new systems. We need systems that are life-sustaining and life-enhancing. Right? We need systems based on love. So we need a new economy that's based on sustainability. We need a new way of doing politics. This doesn't work anymore. In other words, systemic change. That was only 5% of the population. So many of the people I went to college with were hippie wannabes, and God bless them. They put on their love beads and sandals and smoked pot for a year, and then went and graduated and went right on with their otherwise conservative lives, which is fine. No judgment, just describing that's who they were. They just, for a brief few moments, flitted around with being wannabe hippies, okay? So this Cultural Creators Project continued to study the phenomenon, and they found that by the 1990s, over 40% of the population wanted a new way of life. A third way, as they say, not the Democratic version, not the Republican version of the old capitalist themes, but a whole new way. Not unlike, say, in Europe, where they have the Greens Party, which is trying to create a sustainable society, environmentally sustainable society. So now they found that it was 40% of Americans and over 50% of Europeans, and now it's even higher than that according to their estimates. Here's my point. We are collectively changing because we are individually changing. More and more individuals are changing. Now, what are we changing? If you go back to 1,000 years ago, how many people were sitting around and meditating and practicing yoga? A handful of people, right? And that's why historically only a handful of people, whatever that number may be, achieve what's called enlightenment, self-realization that we are the creator. Okay, but now look how many people practice yoga. Look how many people are meditating. These are millions of people. These ideas are universal and they're mainstream. So you have more and more and more people expressing this new thought consciousness, this new way of looking at the world. And so following what happened with the Enlightenment, my argument is because enough individuals are individually changing, a critical mass is being reached that's going to change all of society. Okay. Now, I would suggest that it could happen just like that things will just change. And I know everybody says that's so fanciful, Maynard, dream on. But it's already happened in my lifetime. And so if you go back to 1989, and you look at the Soviet Union, this mighty empire that competed with the United States throughout the Cold War, had all these nuclear weapons, huge military, huge economy, blah, 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 blah. You had a divided Europe. You had the Berlin Wall dividing Berlin. You had people living in the Eastern Zone under communism, being spied upon all the time by the Nazi. The Nazis. So this is all going on. The Stasi, not the Nazi, the Stasi spying on them and all that, as happens in a totalitarian regime. And it all ended one day. It just ended. A critical mass was reached. No blood was shed. It just ended. Within 3 days, people were tearing down the Berlin Wall, and the Soviet Union just ended. It just ended like that because a critical mass was reached. So it's not fanciful. It's already happened in recent world history. So another thing I think is interesting, and who knows if this is the same timing, I'm just throwing this out as a theory, is the Mayan calendar. Now, there was movies that came out about the Mayan calendar supposedly predicted the end of the world in 2012. And so there were movies about the end of the world in 2012 and all came out. But my understanding is that's a big misunderstanding of the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar, which we don't know the exact date of when the next epoch begins, it's somewhere around 2012, but nobody knows exactly because even though they're brilliant mathematicians, we don't quite understand what their projections were in terms of time. But what they predicted was the beginning of the next epoch, which was called that of no time, the realization of no time. That there is no past, there is no future, there's only the present, a spiritual realization perhaps of no time, recognition. So I don't know when things will change, soon I hope. And you know what, nothing's predetermined, so who knows, maybe things won't change. Things are at a pretty grim position right now here in the United States, look how amazingly divided we are. Um, the pandemic has put strains on all our resources all around the world. So, we're at a really difficult point in human history. And so dramatic change needs to take place or it could be game over. So nothing's set in stone. But you know what? I would argue that it's ultimately up to just you and me. I can't do much about the rest of the world, but I can do something about myself. And so can you. And you can change. And I showed you ways to do it. Be in the present moment. Here's another thing about being in the present moment. When you're in the present moment, since fear is a mental construct, you can't possibly experience fear when you're in the present moment. Why? Because if you're in the present moment, your mind can't be spinning on. You're locked into what I'm saying. You're locked in whatever he's doing. You're not thinking about something else. Only when you're thinking about something does fear come into your mind, right? And then you entertain that thought and go, oh yeah, man, I should be worried. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Okay. It's just a mental construct, right? But when you're in the present moment, you can't be fearful. It's impossible, right? And so you'll notice something else replaces it, your natural state. You begin to feel the love when you're in the present moment. Don't go by me, experience it for yourself. Okay, so my argument throughout this is if enough of us change individually, collectively, the world will change. You know what? And even if it doesn't change the world, you will change. You will change for the better because you will be a more loving person. Be in the present moment, practice meditation, choose love over fear. David Hawkins said, we change the world not by what we say or do, but as a consequence of what we have become. Again, the whole thing is about being, just be. There is nothing you have to do in this life. All you have to do is be. Just be you. There's nothing nothing you have to do. There's nothing wrong with all those accomplishments and so forth. But the most important thing is that you just be. Because when you be, you are love. I'll leave you one final quote, also by David Hawkins. He said, make a gift of your life and lift all of mankind by being kind, considerate, forgiving, and compassionate at all times and in all places and under all conditions with everyone as well as yourself. This is the greatest gift anyone can give. So that's my message to you. You want to change the world? Change you first. That's it, folks. Thank you for a tremendous semester. I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible, perhaps in other courses or at least around the campus when we can all enjoy our company again on the campus. Take care.